Script, Professions Under the Microscope, Business Ethics. Did you know that some of the most trusted professionals in the world, doctors, lawyers, accountants, are also the ones most frequently caught in ethical scandals? Not petty fraud. We're talking billion-dollar cover-ups, falsified research, and legal advice that ruins innocent lives. So what's going wrong inside professions that are supposed to protect us? In this video, we're going to put professions under the microscope. We'll explore what actually makes something a profession, why professionals face unique ethical pressures, how conflicts of interest silently corrupt good people, what whistleblowing really costs, and why professional codes of ethics are both powerful and deeply limited. By the end of this video, you'll look at your doctor, your lawyer, and your accountant in a completely different way. Let's get into it. Section 1. What makes something a profession? 045 to 230. Here's a question most people never think to ask. What is a profession exactly? Is it just any job you get paid for? Not quite. Sociologists and ethicists have a very specific answer. A profession is a type of occupation that has three core features. First, it requires specialized knowledge, the kind you can't pick up on YouTube. We're talking years of formal training, certifications, and ongoing education. Second, it has a degree of self-regulation. Professions largely police themselves through licensing boards, bar associations, and medical councils. And third, this is the big one, a profession claims to serve the public good, not just the client in front of them. That third point is what separates a profession from, say, selling cars or managing a restaurant. A doctor doesn't just serve the patient. They are ethically bound to serve public health. An engineer doesn't just serve the company. They're bound to protect public safety. A lawyer doesn't just serve their client. They serve the justice system. This creates a fascinating tension. Professionals are hired by individuals or corporations, but their deeper obligation is to society. When those two loyalties clash, and they do, constantly, that's when ethics gets complicated. And here's the question that should be nagging you right now. If professionals are supposed to serve the public good, why do so many ethical disasters seem to originate inside professional offices? That's exactly what we're digging into next. Section 2. The unique ethical pressures professionals face, 230 to 415. Most people assume professionals fail ethically because they're bad people, greedy, corrupt, selfish. But research in business ethics points to something more uncomfortable: ordinary people and extraordinary structural pressure. Think about it. A junior accountant at a large firm discovers that the senior partner has been quietly inflating revenue numbers. What are their options? Report it and lose their job, their reputation, maybe their entire career in that industry. Stay quiet and become complicit. Or try to fix it quietly and probably fail. That's not a personality problem, that's a structural problem. Professionals operate inside organizations where loyalty to the firm, loyalty to the client, and loyalty to the public can all point in completely different directions at the same time. There's also the problem of moral distance. Professionals often make decisions whose consequences are invisible to them. A pharmaceutical researcher approves data that later harms patients they will never meet. A financial advisor recommends a product they know is mediocre because the commission is better. The harm is real, but it's distant, delayed, and abstract. Add to this the culture of deference that lives inside most professions. Junior members are trained to trust their seniors. Questioning authority isn't just uncomfortable, it can get you labeled a troublemaker. Obedience becomes a professional virtue, which is deeply dangerous. So what's the mechanism that quietly corrupts even well-intentioned professionals? It's often something we call a conflict of interest, and that's our next section. Section 3. Conflicts of interest. The silent corrupting force, 415 to 545. A conflict of interest happens when a professional has two competing interests, and serving one makes it harder to honestly serve the other. It sounds obvious when you say it out loud. But conflicts of interest are often invisible, informal, and completely normalized inside professional cultures. Here's a classic example. A doctor is a paid consultant for a pharmaceutical company. That company makes a drug the doctor may or may not prescribe to patients. Is the doctor biased? Maybe not consciously. But study after study shows that financial relationships with pharmaceutical companies shift prescribing behavior, even when doctors swear they haven't been influenced. Or consider auditors. An accounting firm is hired to audit a corporation's financial statements. but the same firm also sells consulting services to that corporation. The audit team is technically independent, but the firm has a financial relationship with the client. That's a structural conflict of interest, and it contributed to one of the biggest financial scandals in history, Enron. The ethical problem with conflicts of interest isn't just about corruption, it's about trust. Professions run on trust. When the public suspects that a doctor is prescribing for profit, or an auditor is signing off for self-interest, the entire foundation of the professional relationship collapses. So how do professionals push back when they discover wrongdoing? That brings us to one of the most painful topics in business ethics, whistleblowing. Section 4. Whistleblowing. Courage, Cost, and Consequence. 545 to 730. Whistleblowing is when someone inside an organization exposes wrongdoing, usually to regulators, the media, or the public. It sounds heroic, and sometimes it is, but the reality is that whistleblowers typically pay an enormous personal price. They lose their jobs. They get blacklisted from their industries. They face legal retaliation. Their personal relationships suffer. Studies show that the majority of whistleblowers experience significant psychological harm as a result of coming forward. And yet whistleblowers are often the only reason we ever find out about corporate and professional misconduct. Think of the accountants who flagged problems at Enron, the nurses who reported dangerous hospital conditions, the financial analysts who warned about systemic risks before the 2008 crash. Business ethicists debate two key questions here. First, when is whistleblowing morally required, not just morally permitted? Most agree that if the harm is serious, the evidence is strong, and internal channels have failed, the professional has a genuine obligation to come forward. Second, what responsibilities do organizations and society have to protect those who speak up? Many countries now have whistleblower protection laws, but legal protection and cultural protection are very different things. You can protect someone from being fired. It's much harder to protect them from being quietly frozen out of an entire profession. Which leads to the final question this chapter asks. Can a code of ethics actually fix any of this? Section 5. Professional Codes of Ethics. Powerful, limited, and often misunderstood. 730 to 915. Almost every profession has a formal code of ethics. The Hippocratic Oath for doctors. The ABA Model Rules for lawyers. The AICPA Code for accountants. These documents set out principles, things like confidentiality, integrity, independence, and duty of care. Codes of ethics do real work. They clarify expectations. They give professionals a reference point when facing pressure. They create a shared language for ethical reasoning inside a profession. And they signal to the public that the profession takes its responsibilities seriously. But here's what codes of ethics cannot do. They cannot resolve genuine moral dilemmas. A code can tell a doctor to respect patient autonomy and also to act in the patient's best interest. It cannot tell them which value wins when those two principles conflict. A code can demand independence from an auditor. It cannot eliminate the financial pressures that make independence difficult in practice. Critics also point out that professional codes are often written by the profession, for the profession. They can become tools for managing the profession's reputation rather than genuinely protecting the public. The question of who watches the watchers is not answered by the code itself. What ethics scholars generally conclude is this: codes of ethics are necessary but not sufficient. They need to be combined with strong organizational culture, meaningful external oversight, genuine whistleblower protection, and a professional training system that doesn't just teach skills, it builds moral character. Because at the end of the day, a code on a wall doesn't make decisions. People do. So let's bring this all together. A profession isn't just a job. It's a public trust. That trust is constantly threatened by structural pressures, conflicts of interest, and cultures that reward silence. Whistleblowers carry enormous personal risk to protect a public that doesn't always know their names. And codes of ethics are a starting point, not a solution. The real work of professional ethics happens in the moments when no one is watching, and the pressure to do the wrong thing is quietly enormous. If this video made you think differently about the professionals in your life, or maybe about a profession you're considering entering, leave a comment below. What profession do you think faces the toughest ethical pressures? I genuinely want to know what you think. If you found this useful, please hit like. It helps this channel reach more students who need it. And subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, where we go deeper into corporate social responsibility and ask who businesses actually owe obligations to. See you in the next one.